Hey guys, Scott here. Today I want to talk about tunneling and all of the nuances that go on in the discussion. The question is tunneling the best strategy for killers? Full stop, yes or no? That's what I want to come up with an answer with. And so the first thing I did was try to find a definition of tunneling, because the definition of tunneling, it's different depending on who you ask. Some people, it's you just simply chase someone too long. Some people, it's you just only focus one guy till they die. For some people, it's, well, you want one guy dead, but you'll chase other people until an opportunity presents itself for the weaker player to be taken out because they have more hooks or whatever. So I went to Twitter and I made a poll, and surprisingly, there was an almost unanimous agreement that the definition of tunneling is simply focusing one person till they die. We had like 97% of people with like 10,000 votes agree with that. So then I asked a follow-up question. Okay, so if focusing one person till they die is what tunneling is tunneling the best strategy for killers? And this was impressively split for 11,000 votes. It was pretty much exactly 50-50 when I woke up. So that I found very interesting, and I wanted to go over this whole discussion here because I think I know where a lot of the variables come into play. Now, I intentionally worded this as black and white as possible. It's true there is more nuance that goes into when tunneling is a good idea, but I wanted to give a chance for people to have their just gut reaction. Is tunneling good, yes or no? Just say yes or no. And I just wanted to capture that quick gut opinion. But let me go over my views of it first. A lot of you know my views on tunneling. I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it's necessary. I'm saying this from a killer perspective. I play Survivor too, but as I'm actively playing killer, I find tunneling most of the time, there are exceptions, I find tunneling to be not only not morally good, I find it to be actively detrimental to my impact on the match. And what I mean by that is, when you tunnel one player until they die, you are doing all micro gameplay. Micro gameplay in DBD is the chase element. It's how quickly you can down one guy, how good you are at running tiles, how good they are at, anti-loop, and how good they are at dodging your hits and, dodging your mind game, stuff like that. That's what the micro gameplay is. And in a tunnel scenario where you're just focusing one guy till they die, you are only doing micro gameplay, which means if you have a macro skill, then a macro knowledge that you've been gaining over the years, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. So what happens is if I just tunnel someone relentlessly because a build asked me to or something, all of the skill I've earned over the past 7 years of map knowledge and all of this stuff, it doesn't matter. So what it does is it makes the skill difference between who I'm going against much, much closer together. Because even a decent player with not that many hours in the game can run even a good killer on a bad map for 3 or 4 minutes if they have the entire map to themselves. That's not even an unrealistic thing. The game is not meant for one survivor to have every single resource in the map. It's just not balanced for that. If that was the case, the game would be massively survivor-sided. It'd be incredibly unfair. You even look at 1v1 cowsheds with some of the best killers in the world, you see 3-4 minute timers on some of the higher end ones. Because if you have a good survivor, or even an okay survivor, on a setup where the killer is forced to only focus that person and they have the entire map, it's really hard to down those players. And that is why I don't think tunneling is even good, because I pride myself in having built a lot of macro gameplay knowledge over the years. It's the hardest thing to learn in the game because it only comes from hundreds and thousands of games of experience of just generally knowing where things are at the right time. If I go to tunnel someone, that skill doesn't matter anymore. And so I equalize myself down to a lot of the rest of the player base that might not have the time in the day to get that level of skill. I'm not saying I'm I'm God's greatest soldier or anything like that. I just have a lot of time to play the game, and therefore I'm able to develop that. And by tunneling relentlessly on one guy, I negate almost all that skill that I've learned. So that's my personal view on tunneling, why I not only don't find it morally, again, it's a video game, who fucking cares? I don't find it morally good, but I also don't find it even to be the most effective strategy in most of my matches. If I know I'm going against like a 4-man comp team, sometimes it's a little different, but for the most part, I'll still try to not do that. So that's for me, though. That's a subjective thing. That's my opinion on it. The thing is, though, whenever I bring that up, when I say I don't have to tunnel in high MMR matches, I always am met with the same response. A casual player will say, okay, well, I don't play this game for a living. It's stupid to expect that I can also do that as well. And that's fair initially, but when you really think about the argument they're making, it's a little bit of copium. Because I'm saying that at high MMR, I don't have to tunnel to win consistently. I still lose sometimes. I don't win every game. Of course, no one does. But I still consistently win without it. But a casual player might not be able to do that. The thing is, though, if they are a casual player that only plays 40, 50 minutes a day, they play a couple games and log off for the day, they're probably not going to be high MMR then. It's like they want to have both sides of the argument. They want to say that they're going against the best players, but also admit that they're losing and they're not putting in the time to even have the MMR to go against those players. It doesn't make any sense. And I know the MMR system's not perfect. It's not great, but they have made it a bit stricter recently. And it does, at the very least, separates kind of babies from everybody else. So if you truly are a casual player, the people you're going against should also be weaker too. You can't be losing your matches because you're a casual player and then also still be raising your MMR at the same time. It doesn't make any sense. You can't be doing both of those. You're either a casual player or a high MMR, high level player. And I don't know how you can rationalize being both of those at the same time. But even so, a lot of this comes down to if you are a casual player that's been told you need to tunnel and that's the most effective strategy, you sort of have this self-fulfilling prophecy that happens, where you're basically just rolling the dice on the guy that you're chasing. If the first person you chase actually happens to be kind of decent or is a better player than you are, the tunnel is probably going to end up losing you the game. It might take you 3 gens to down that person, and then they get hooked, and then you have to do another chase, and they have to hook him again, and by all this time, the gens are going to pop and you finally killed one person, and you're in a really bad spot. So you get this weird self-fulfilling prophecy where you're going to go, well, I have to tunnel because the gens are going so fast, but the gens are going so fast because you're not spreading pressure at anyone else because you're focusing someone. And so you're in this endless loop of not being able to rationalize that the reason the game is going so fast is because you're ignoring everybody else on the team who's just free to do gens the whole time. And that is one of the, I think, the biggest complaints I have with players complaining about that specific thing is you're kind of doing it to yourself. Yeah, you might get hooks less frequently, but the game will also go slower if you're not just focusing one guy and 3 guys are left to just do whatever they want. But every time I bring that point up, there's the comp argument. Every single time someone says, well, in competitive DBD, they tunnel every game. Are you saying you're more knowledgeable than competitive players? No, they're all better than me. Of course they are. I'm not stupid. The point is, you and I are not playing competitive Dead by Daylight. It might as well have a separate launcher at this point. It is a different video game with map bans and perk bans, build bans, killer bans. Killers can only be on certain maps. It's a completely separate game. You know why tunneling is so prevalent in comp matches? It's because you can't have 4 survivors with DS dead hard off the record. You're not allowed to do that. It's ironically sometimes safer in comp to tunnel because there's only a 25% chance of a survivor having the anti-tunnel build, meaning there's a 3 in 4 chance you're just going to get a free tunnel and a guy has no second chance perks because they are not allowed to do that. That's not what the regular game is like. The regular game, you could have 4 full anti-tunnel builds with styptic agents, buckle up for the people. You can have all this shit that you're not allowed to have in a regular match. So whenever someone brings up that argument when they do it in comp, yeah, because it's actually safer to tunnel in comp. There's almost no chance they go against the slew of second chance perks the survivor might have in comp. So it's actually safer to do. It's not realistic. I even went further and I talked to a couple of people in the competitive scene and asked them if there were no restrictions on perks on the survivor side in competitive matches, would tunneling go down? And they all unanimously said, yes, tunneling would go way down. Now, they also all agreed that killers would lose way more because, half the killer roster cannot beat a super competent 4-man team that's got multiple second chance perks. And I agree with that completely as well. But they said that tunneling would drastically go down in competitive matches if there were no more restrictions. When the reverse situation happens, like I think Momos' blight loss for his streak is a perfect example, where he went against an unregulated comp team. It was a comp team that was allowed to use 4 DS dead hard and off the record, for example. They were allowed to do that, and because of that, there's just no actual safe options for tunneling anymore. And a lot of the times when he tried to get someone out of the match, they had off the record, so he had to hit them, and then when he downed them, they still had DS, and then after that, they had dead hard, and it's not like they just had so many more layers of protection that it actually was worse to tunnel people sometimes. If you think about it this way, someone that has a full anti-tunnel build actually takes more hits to hook than someone that's at full health. Someone that's at full health, even this is negating chainsaw. With a chainsaw, it's even more hits. But if you want to hit somebody off the hook, you get through their off the record like that. Then you have to hit them again to down them. Then you pick them up and they have DS. And then there's another chase. Then they have dead hard, so that's another hit. I'm saying there's actually even more hits than on a healthy survivor, if you look at it that way. Now, obviously, not everyone's running the 4, anti-tunnel perks. Like, of course, that's not happening as well. But I'm saying when you do this, you invite the possibility. You're just rolling the dice and hoping that they don't have that. And I hate that as killer. I hate leaving my victory up to chance. What perks they have and what build they have, and is it the one that's going to counter what I'm currently doing? I don't like that. And I feel like that minimizes my skill when luck is brought up a lot too. So the whole comp argument I find super silly because it's a separate video game. It doesn't make any sense. In fact, what all the comp players said is that if they did remove these restrictions and they were all allowed to run anti-tunnel builds, what would happen is what, in my opinion, is the actual smart tunneling strat, where you focus 2 players. You bounce back and forth between them. So where you're effectively still tunneling each person, but you're waiting for all their second chance perks to expire. And while that's happening, while that's expiring, you're tunneling the other guy. Is it even tunneling at that point because you're now chasing 2 people? That's up for debate. But that is actually the smartest thing you can do as killer, in my opinion, is juggle 2 people. That way you ignore all these perks and you can still get someone out of the match fairly quickly. And I think killer players really need to start getting used to that, because without a doubt, Decisive Strike is going to get buffed. We know that perk is going to get buffed. It's already slated to be changed. We know it's not getting nerfed based off the general player base. I know for very good players, it can have immense value, but again, they change things off of the general player base, so we know that's getting buffed. So you're probably about to start seeing a lot more of this shit again, which means this whole tunneling thing is going to be far less effective once they change that. We'll see what they do, but I'm willing to bet this is going to start being significantly harder for people that play like that. So let's go over the actual pros and cons of tunneling and not tunneling. So the worst part about tunneling someone off the get-go is that you give them the entire map. I went over this briefly before, but giving one survivor the entire map when they're not impeded by any other used resources, they know where everything has been used, that's a nightmare. That is really hard to down even just decent players that have the entire map to themselves. Additionally, if you were to not tunnel, you ignore half of people's builds sometimes. You will ignore DS, borrowed time, off the record, the whole plot twist and the power struggle under a pallet. All these builds just they have no effect anymore. You can negate, even some people will just throw on off the record. You can negate large portions of people's builds by just simply not tunneling. And that can actually end up saving you more time having to not deal with 3 layers of protection and just starting a new chase than it would take you to get through those layers of protection and down that guy that's got all that defense. So again, you're just rolling the dice though, because you don't know which builds they have, and you're just kind of leaving it up to chance. One of the most undefined benefits of spreading pressure, though, it's really hard to describe. I'm going to try to word it like this. When you are playing killer, there's just sort of a bubble around you. When people enter that bubble, their actions get disrupted a little bit. If someone's healing and you start walking kind of close to them, even if you don't see them, they kind of have to stop that heal. They have to maybe go somewhere else or something like that. And that little interaction wastes time. Or maybe you find it, and now you've interrupted that heal. And now because you interrupted that heal, one guy is now not fully healed anymore. And maybe he's not able to get to another guy, which means now that guy is going to be twice as easy to down later. It's so hard to quantify the snowball effect that spreading around to other places has. That's why I try to visual like a bubble, and if people get caught in the bubble, actions get interrupted. It's really hard to describe that, but I'm telling you, that is truly a thing that happens. If you just sit in one spot and chase one guy and the other 3 guys are completely unimpeded, gens are going to fly so fast. But if you are exuding your presence in other areas, it makes people more hesitant to do things. It makes people more hesitant to reset, makes them more hesitant to do gens in your face, makes them more hesitant to go for unhooks. It just makes them more hesitant to do everything, and everything slows down a little bit. Again, it's really hard to quantify that, and it's only when you're actually looking at a match can you see it happen, but I promise that is legitimately a thing that does happen. Things overall just slow down if you just are in other places, I guess. It's really hard to describe that, but it truly is an actual phenomenon that does happen in the actual game. So, overall though, the main argument is tunneling the best strategy for killers, yes or no? And the truth is, you can't really answer it with a yes or no. A user by the name of Chrism on Twitter put it pretty much exactly how I feel my views on tunneling. This is what they said word for word. Is going into a game with the pre-existing decision to tunnel someone the best strategy? No, it's not. And unfortunately, a large portion of the player base does exactly that. Then it doesn't work. They blame the game, except they blame everything but themselves, not realizing that it's mostly a self-fulfilling prophecy that they have set because they're just doing an Oonga Boonga tunnel brain instead of wisely tunneling. The follow-up was, Will the best strategy involve occasionally tunneling someone out of the game? Yes, and that is true. There are times when tunneling someone out of the match presents itself in such a time and a scenario where it will be beneficial and time efficient to do that. And in that scenario, tunneling that person in that time becomes the smart thing to do. The problem here is the answer to the question, is tunneling the best strategy for killers, yes or no? Yes, when the opportunity presents itself. That's the end of the statement, in my opinion. If you go into a match just planning to tunnel and that's all that's on your brain, it's actually more detrimental than helpful, in my opinion. And that's legit what most players do, and I'm trying to change that. If you're going to tunnel, at least be smarter about it, so you have less blame on the game and more blame on the strategy that you're actually using. But is tunneling the best strategy for killer, yes or no? Yes, when the situation presents itself, but the situation will only present itself to players that are aware to look for that situation. And you will only find that situation by spreading pressure and learning when the right times to tunnel are. If you just keep doing the same strategy over and over, it'll work sometimes and it'll not work sometimes, but you'll never get better at the game, and you'll never learn these macro gameplay nuances of when it really, truly is the best idea to tunnel. So that's pretty much the end of the argument. It is a slightly mixed bag. Just brainless tunneling is bad, but you'll never learn when to smartly tunnel if that's all you do. So, Scott Jund, teaching people to smartly tunnel since 2024. Fuck.